Good day, everyone. This is the Dr. Sophie Rothschild show. And the question is that many people have this misunderstanding that the Bible supports communism and socialism. Frankly, that is total nonsense. Case in point, right? Communism does not allow for the private ownership of land or anyone owning their own farms. In fact, in all cases of communism, the land, the farm is seized by the government or controlled by the government. The government control the means of production. Now, in China, they have a system, somewhat of a hybrid system, somewhat. But in any communist system, the government control the means of production. People do not own their own land. Now, in the Bible, we know when the Israelites settled the land of the promised land, but the first thing they did, all the tribes were given land, and within each tribe, the families had their own land. And it's passed on from generation to generation within the family. So, right then and there, we see that the Bible supports private ownership of land and private ownership of the means of production. Secondly, you know, it's in the Bible that it's only 10% tithes for everyone. Everyone paid the same rate, 10% tithes, which many people today would call a flat tax system, which goes against the very notion of progressive taxation. Because in progressive tax systems, the more money you make, the higher your rate will be. That is something that the Bible does not allow. The Bible says everyone pay the same rate. So right then there in the Bible, you have private ownership of the land, and which is actually the best thing to do. What they did was they gave each tribe land, and within each tribe they had their own land and their own means of production. And each family had their own land, which they pass off to generation. All right, so they own people on their own land, they farm their own land and produce their own produce, and they sell their own produce. And sometimes they take some of it to Jerusalem to sell, but they sell their own produce. They own their own land, they farm their own land, and they sell their own produce and they keep all their money. That is clearly not communism. So yes, the Bible support private ownership of land, private ownership of the means of production, and private ownership of property. Something which is definitely not communism, because what the Bible did was by giving people a plot of land to own for themselves, people were empowered to be totally self-sufficient. Something again which communism does not allow. Communism allows for you being a slave to the state. The Bible does not support that. And also the Bible supports the idea of a flat tax system. Everybody pay the same rate, 10%, which something is clearly against progressive taxation system and the socialism nonsense we see today. So, no, the Bible does not support communism. It's pure nonsense. It's a scam. End of conversation. All right? Thank you.